That Christmas, the house was still filled with laughter and chatter. My father, Richard, sat at the head of the table, flipping through his phone to check the football scores. My mother, Linda, was busy showing off her new necklace to my sister, Sarah. Sarah's husband, David, was telling a long-winded story about his hunting trip in Wisconsin. My niece, Chloe, 10 years old, darted around opening gifts, chirping excitedly about the latest toy she'd seen on TikTok. My son, Noah, 8, sat quietly beside me, his big brown eyes fixed on the torn wrapping paper scattered across the floor. He didn't ask for anything, just smiled softly when he received a small blue toy car, a cheap little gift I had picked up from a discount store. Then everything changed in a single moment. Chloe, with her blonde ponytail and bright, innocent voice, pointed straight at Noah and said loudly, as if announcing a fun secret, "Grandma said your mom is just the maid." The room fell silent for one heartbeat, then laughter exploded. My mother, Linda, chuckled under her breath, glancing at Sarah as if they shared some private joke. Sarah covered her mouth, but I saw the corner of her lips curve up. David burst out laughing, and Richard didn't even lift his head from his phone. He just grunted, like the whole thing wasn't worth a reaction. I stood there, heat rushing to my face. My heart pounded so hard I thought it might burst. I looked down at Noah. His eyes were still fixed on the toy car, but his small hand tightened around mine so tight it hurt. He didn't cry, didn't speak, but I knew. I knew he had heard it, understood it, and that his little heart was breaking. I wanted to scream, to ask them what they were thinking, letting a 10-year-old say something so cruel. To confront my mother, the woman who had planted that poison in Chloe's head, telling her that I, her own daughter, the woman who lost her husband at 31, was nothing more than the maid. But I did nothing. The words stuck in my throat, heavy and sharp like a stone. I couldn't let Noah see his mother fall apart. Not here, not in front of these people. I stood up, held Noah's hand tightly, and walked out of the room. The laughter continued behind me, as if our absence meant nothing. No one called my name. No one followed. I didn't bother taking back the cheap gifts I had spent weeks choosing, counting every dollar because money was tight. I just wanted to get Noah out of there, away from that glass cage I once called a family. Outside, the snow was falling thicker, blanketing the road that led to the highway. I opened the car door, buckled Noah in, and slid into the driver's seat. My hands trembled as I started the engine, the slow warmth of the heater spreading through the cabin. Noah stared out the window and whispered, "Mom, did I do something wrong?" I gripped the steering wheel tightly, forcing my voice to stay calm. "No, sweetheart. Not at all. They're the ones who are wrong." I wanted to say more, to explain, but how could I tell an 8-year-old that his own family, the people who were supposed to love him, saw him as a joke? I just ran my hand through Noah's hair and silently promised myself that I would take him somewhere safe, somewhere surrounded by people who truly loved us. I thought of my grandmother, Margaret, or Maggie, as she liked to be called. She lived in St. Joseph, a small town near Lake Michigan, about a 3-hour drive away. Maggie, 78, was a retired history teacher with a spirit stronger than the snowstorm outside. She had always been the only one in the family who saw me as a person, not a cash machine, not a failure for losing my husband. I pressed the gas pedal, headlights cutting through the white blur of snow, leading us toward Maggie. My mind drifted back to the days after Michael's death in 2020. I was 27, raising Noah alone in a small apartment in Chicago, working myself to exhaustion just to pay off hospital debts and rent. My family, my mother, father, and Sarah never asked if I was okay. They only asked when I could send money to cover their utility bills or their next vacation in Hawaii, which they proudly showed off on Instagram. I used to think it was my duty, that if I helped them enough, they would love me, except Noah. But I was wrong. Tonight, Chloe's words were the final proof. To them, I wasn't a daughter, not a sister, I was just the maid. As I drove along I-94, my phone buzzed. A message from my mother, Linda, flashed on the screen. "Don't forget to send the utility payment tomorrow. They said they'll cut the power." No apology. No concern for the fact that I had just walked out of their house in tears. I stared at the message, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. I typed, "You'll get what you deserve." I hit send, my heart pounding hard. They didn't know that those words weren't just a response. They were a declaration. A promise. A beginning. The snow kept falling, covering the road ahead, but I wasn't afraid. I knew where I was going, and this time, I wasn't coming back. The snowstorm grew fiercer, the wind howling against the car windows as if it wanted to swallow every sound. The I-94 was slick and treacherous, the headlights dim and hazy through the white curtain of snow. I glanced at Noah in the rearview mirror. My son sat quietly in the back seat, clutching his small blue toy car, his wide brown eyes staring out the window. He didn't ask any more questions, but his silence made my heart ache. I knew he was trying to make sense of what had just happened, why his grandmother, grandfather, and Aunt Sarah had laughed when Chloe called me the maid. I wanted to say something to ease his mind, but my throat was dry, as if every word had been swallowed by the storm. The 3-hour drive from Naperville to St. Joseph, Michigan, had never felt so long. My mind replayed the Christmas dinner over and over. My mother's laughter, Sarah's mocking eyes, my father's indifference. I gripped the steering wheel tighter, forcing myself to focus on the road ahead. Before leaving Naperville, I had texted Maggie just one short message, "I'm coming. Something big happened." She hadn't asked any questions, only replied, "The door is always open for you, and Noah." That was Maggie, strong, steady, always ready, like a lighthouse in a storm. When the car turned onto the dirt road leading to Maggie's farmhouse, the warm yellow glow of her old wooden house cut through the snow. An American flag flapped on the porch beside a faded Christmas wreath. I parked, turned off the engine, and took a deep breath. "We're here, sweetheart," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Noah nodded, still holding the toy car like it was his only shield. The front door opened before I could knock. Maggie stood there, her silver hair tied neatly back, wearing a deep red sweater and worn-out fur slippers. She didn't say a word, just opened her arms wide and pulled both me and Noah into a tight embrace. The familiar scent of her lavender perfume made my eyes sting. "Come in. It's freezing out there," she said, her voice low but firm. Inside, the house felt like another world. The fireplace crackled softly, the faint smell of gingerbread filled the air, and the TV played A Christmas Story at a gentle volume. Tom, Maggie's husband, an 80-year-old retired firefighter, stepped out of the kitchen holding a beer and a half-eaten ginger cookie. Wearing a crooked Santa hat, he grinned broadly. "Well, look who we've got here, our special guests," he exclaimed, making Noah laugh for the first time that night. "Tom, take Noah to the kitchen and make him some hot cocoa," Maggie ordered, her tone leaving no room for argument. Tom winked at Noah. "Come on, kiddo. I've got the good stuff, real cocoa with marshmallows." Noah hesitated for a second, looking at me for approval. I nodded and patted his head. "Go with Mr. Tom, sweetheart. Mommy's right here." As Noah followed Tom into the kitchen, I could hear him giggling at Tom's story about the time he accidentally set the Christmas turkey on fire back in 1982. Maggie pulled me into the hallway and closed the door, muting their voices to a soft murmur. She looked at me, those sharp blue eyes seeming to see straight through every layer of pain I'd been trying to hide. "Tell me, Zoe," she said, her voice gentle but firm. "What happened?" I took a deep breath, and then everything poured out like a flood. I told her about Chloe, about the cruel words that had sliced through the room. "Grandma said your mom is just the maid." I told her about my mother's laughter, Sarah's smirk, David's amusement, and my father's silence, as if Noah and I were nothing more than a bad joke. I told her how I had taken Noah's hand and walked out of that house without a word, without even taking back the gifts I had spent weeks choosing, because I refused to let my son see his mother break. And I told her about the message from my mother, demanding money for the utility bills, as if I were still their personal ATM. Maggie didn't interrupt. She just stood there, arms crossed, nodding slowly. When I finally stopped speaking, my eyes blurred with tears, she stepped forward and pulled me into her arms. I cried like a child, like I hadn't cried in years, as if all the pain of the past 5 years, since Michael's death, since I became a widow, since my family began treating me like the maid, was spilling out at once. Maggie rubbed my back and whispered, "You don't have to endure them anymore, Zoe. Not ever again." I wiped my tears, trying to steady my breath. "But what do I do now, Grandma? They're my family. I've tried so hard to make them love Noah, to make them love me. But I'm so tired." My voice trembled, and I hated myself for it. I hated that I still longed for their approval, knowing they would never give it. Maggie guided me to the armchair beside the fireplace. She looked at me, her gaze sharp as glass. "Zoe, family isn't the people who break you. Family is the people who stand by you when all you have left is yourself. You and Noah will always have me." She paused, her tone lowering, steady and deliberate. "And I'll make sure everything is set right." I didn't fully understand what she meant, but there was something in her voice, a quiet certainty that sent a chill down my spine. Maggie wasn't just comforting me, she was planning something. I looked through the window and saw Noah sitting in the kitchen, laughing with Tom while sipping his cocoa. He looked peaceful, as if this house was exactly where he belonged. But inside me, another storm was forming. I thought of all the times I had sent money to my mother to pay their bills, all the times Sarah had called me a failure because I couldn't afford expensive gifts for Chloe. I remembered the look on Noah's face whenever his grandmother said, "You're not really a Harper." I had thought it was my duty, that if I kept helping them, they would finally see me as part of the family. But tonight I realized I never truly was. Maggie stood and placed a hand on my shoulder. "Get some rest, Zoe. Tomorrow, we start fixing this." She smiled, but her eyes were sharp, like she was ready for a battle I couldn't yet imagine. I nodded, feeling a strange mix of hope and unease rising inside me. I didn't know what she planned, but I knew one thing: Noah and I weren't alone anymore. Noah came running from the kitchen, holding a gingerbread cookie shaped like a snowman. "Mom, Mr. Tom says he can make it snow inside the house." "Really?" he said, grinning from ear to ear. I hugged him tightly, feeling the warmth of his small body against mine. "That's wonderful, sweetheart," I said, my voice trembling. "We're going to be okay." I looked over at Maggie, and she nodded. The storm outside still howled, but inside that house, I felt a flicker of light, small, but enough to guide the way. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the kitchen window, glinting off the thin layer of snow that still clung to the glass. The smell of pancakes and maple syrup mingled with the rich aroma of brewed coffee, filling the room with warmth that stood in stark contrast to last night's blizzard. I sat across from Noah at the old wooden table, watching him bite into a large pancake, syrup smeared at the corner of his mouth. He smiled and pointed at the small TV in the corner, where A Christmas Story played for what felt like the 10th time that day. "Mom, Ralphie's about to get his toy gun," Noah said, his voice full of excitement. I smiled back, but the smile didn't reach my eyes. Inside, the ache from last night still lingered, a wound that had not yet begun to heal. Maggie walked in wearing a green sweater with a reindeer on it, holding a pot of coffee in her hand. She poured me a full cup, then sat down, her sharp eyes watching closely. "Sleep well, Zoe?" she asked, her tone gentle but layered with meaning. I shrugged, not wanting to lie. "I'm fine, Grandma. Just, still can't believe what happened last night." Noah looked up, his eyes filled with worry. "Mom, does Grandma hate me?" The question hit me like a knife. I brushed his hair back and forced my voice to stay calm. "No, sweetheart, nobody hates you. It's just, sometimes grown-ups do the wrong thing." I looked at Maggie, silently pleading for help, for the right words I couldn't find. Maggie placed her hand on Noah's shoulder and smiled. "You're the best Christmas gift anyone could ask for, Noah. Don't ever let anyone make you think otherwise. Now, go get some more syrup." "I'm sure, Mr. Tom's hiding some in the kitchen." Noah nodded and dashed off, leaving the room quiet again. Maggie turned her gaze back to me, saying nothing, but her eyes urged me to continue. I took a deep breath, knowing it was time to face the truth not just about last night, but about all the years I had buried beneath silence. I don't understand why they're like this, I began, my voice trembling. Chloe's just a child, but my mother, she must have told her something. And Sarah, Dad, all of them, they laughed, like Noah wasn't even part of the family. I've tried, Grandma. I've tried so hard to make them love Noah, to make them accept me, but I'm just. I stopped, unable to say the words the maid. But Maggie understood. She nodded, her fingers tightening around her coffee cup. What did I ever do to make them hate me so much? I whispered, tears spilling down my cheeks. Since Michael died, I've done everything to hold this family together. I paid Sarah's rent when she got evicted in 2022. I paid Mom's hospital bills when she had knee surgery. I even sent money so they could go to Hawaii last year while Noah and I ate instant noodles for a week just to save. I paused, the memories flooding back the nights I sat in our tiny Chicago apartment, staring at my empty bank account, while Mom posted photos from a yacht with the caption, "Family time." I used to think that if I helped them, they would finally see me as part of the family. But I was wrong. Maggie stayed silent, her eyes never leaving mine. Do you remember when Mom called me a failure? I continued bitterly. It was the first Christmas after Michael died. I went to their house with a batch of homemade cookies because I couldn't afford a real gift. She looked at them and said, "Zoe, you can't keep being such a disappointment." Sarah laughed, and Dad just shook his head. I tried, Grandma. I tried to make them proud. But to them, I've always been just an ATM. Maggie placed her hand over mine, her touch warm and steady. Zoe, you are not an ATM. You're a mother, a strong woman, and you've done everything you could to hold that family together. But they don't deserve you. Her voice dropped lower, filled with resolve. I've seen how they treat you for a long time. When Michael was alive, they pretended to be kind. But after he passed, they started seeing you as nothing more than a source of money, and that ends today. I stared at her, stunned. You knew? I asked, my voice trembling. Maggie nodded. I suspected for a while. I even paid off one of your credit card debts without telling you, because I didn't want you to worry. But now it's clear they haven't just taken advantage of you, Zoe. They've hurt Noah. And that, she said firmly, I cannot forgive. I blinked, trying to process her words. Maggie had paid off my debt? I thought back to the times when bills mysteriously disappeared, when I believed I had simply gotten lucky. But it wasn't luck, it was her, quietly standing behind me all along. Why didn't you tell me? I asked, my voice cracking. I wanted you to find your own strength, Zoe, she said softly, her gaze tender now. But it's time you knew the truth. They haven't just taken your money, they've been stripping away your dignity. And I won't let that continue. Noah came running back into the room, holding a bottle of syrup, breaking the heavy silence. Mom, Mr. Tom says he can make star-shaped pancakes, he shouted, his eyes bright with joy. I smiled, pulling him into my arms. That's amazing, sweetheart. I bet Mr. Tom's going to burn the pan again. Noah burst out laughing, and in that moment, I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe Maggie was right, family isn't the people who break you. Family is the ones like her, like Noah, the ones who remind you that you are worth something. Maggie stood up and walked toward the old bookshelf in the corner of the room. She searched for a moment, then turned back with a thick white envelope in her hand and placed it on the table in front of me. Open it, Zoe, she said, her voice calm but firm the way a teacher might speak to a student. I looked at the envelope, my heart pounding. Grandma, what is this? I asked, my voice shaking with worry. Maggie didn't answer right away. She sat down in the armchair across from me, her hands clasped tightly together. Open it and you'll understand. My fingers trembled as I slid the envelope open, feeling the smooth texture of the paper. Inside was a stack of documents, the top one labeled Deed of Ownership. I skimmed it and froze when I saw my name, Zoe Harper, printed clearly under owner. It was the deed to a small house in Evanston, Illinois, less than a 10-minute walk from Noah's elementary school. I flipped to the next page, where a red stamp read paid in full. On the last page, A silver house key was taped neatly beside a handwritten note from Maggie. "You deserve this more than anyone. Start again." I looked up, my eyes blurred with tears. "Grandma, when did you do this?" My voice trembled, disbelieving the weight of what I was holding. Maggie smiled, though her gaze stayed steady. "I bought that house 3 years ago, when you first talked about wanting to move out of that rundown apartment in Chicago. I knew you wouldn't accept it if I gave it to you then, so I kept it waiting for the moment you'd need it most. And that moment, Zoe, is now." I shook my head, overwhelmed by gratitude and disbelief. "But I can't take this. I haven't done anything to deserve it. I stopped, the word Maid hovering on my tongue, but I couldn't bring myself to say it in front of Maggie. She leaned forward and took my hands, gripping them so firmly I could feel the strength in her aging fingers. "Zoe, listen to me. You've done everything you could to hold that family together, even when they didn't deserve it. You've raised Noah on your own, worked yourself to exhaustion, and never once asked me for help. You deserve this house. You deserve a new beginning. And most of all, you deserve to be happy." I broke down crying, unable to hold it in any longer. I thought about all those years in that cramped apartment in Chicago, the nights Noah and I slept on a fold-out bed, the months I counted every dollar to make rent while still sending money to Mom and Sarah. I thought about the nights I lay awake, wondering if maybe my mother was right, if I really was the failure she said I was. But now, sitting in Maggie's warm living room, with Noah sleeping peacefully beside me, I felt a flicker of hope, small, fragile, but bright enough to light the darkness inside me. "I don't even know what to say," I whispered, wiping away tears. "Thank you. But I'm scared. If I take this, they won't leave me alone. They'll think I stole something from them." Maggie raised an eyebrow, a mischievous smile tugging at her lips. "They can think whatever they want. But from this moment on, they no longer have power over you. And I'll make sure of that." She stood up, pulled her phone from the pocket of her sweater, and dialed a number. "Let's make it clear how this ends," she said, putting the call on speaker. The line rang twice before my mother's voice came through, cold, impatient, and sharp. "Mom, why are you calling so late?" Maggie didn't hesitate. "Linda, from this moment forward, I'm cutting off all financial support for you and the entire Harper family. No more tuition for Chloe, no more mortgage payments, not another cent. I know what you told Chloe about Zoe and Noah. I know how you've been using Zoe since Michael died. It all stops tonight." There was silence on the other end. I heard my mother exhale sharply before she hung up without saying a word. Maggie placed the phone down and looked at me. "They can't face the truth, Zoe. But you can. You and Noah deserve a life where they can't drag you down anymore." I looked at the key on the table, glinting softly in the firelight. It wasn't just a key to a house, it was a key to freedom, to a second chance. But deep inside, fear still crept through me. I knew my family, my mother, father, and Sarah wouldn't let things end quietly. They would find a way to retaliate, to pull me back into their chaos. I thought of Noah, of the way his eyes looked when Chloe called me the maid. I couldn't let my son grow up under that shadow of contempt. "Do you think Noah will like the new house, Grandma?" I asked, my voice hoarse. Maggie smiled, this time softer, warmer. "He's going to love it, and so will you. It's a small house, nothing fancy, but it's close to Noah's school. It has a front yard where he can play ball, and most importantly, Zoe, it's yours." I hefter hitso and Deltment. I nodded, gripping the key tightly in my hand. It was cold, yet I could feel its weight, the weight of a future I had never dared to imagine. I looked at Noah, still fast asleep, his face calm and untouched by the pain of last night. I knew that for him, I had to be stronger. For him, I had to accept this gift, even as my mother's voice echoed in my mind. "You're a failure, Zoe." Maggie stood and gently patted my shoulder. "Get some rest. Tomorrow, we'll start planning the next step. But tonight, just be Zoe, not the maid, not anyone's bank account, just Zoe." She walked into the kitchen, leaving me with the key and the unopened wooden box on the table. I looked at them, my heart pounding. I didn't know what awaited me, but I knew one thing. I was finally ready to move forward. The morning light of the 26th of December 2024 filtered through Maggie's kitchen window, illuminating the dust motes floating in the air. I sat at the table, holding a mug of cold coffee, my eyes fixed on the house key to Evanston lying in front of me. Noah was playing with his Lego set in the living room, his laughter ringing out as Tom told him the story of how he once set the Christmas turkey on fire. But my mind was restless. Maggie's phone call from the night before her firm declaration cutting off all financial support for the Harper family still echoed in my head. I knew my mother, my father, and Sarah would not let it end there. They never did. My phone buzzed, shattering the quiet. A message from Sarah flashed across the screen. "What did you say to Grandma, Zoe? My credit card got declined this morning. Target wouldn't even let me check out." I stared at the message, my thumb hovering over the keyboard, but I didn't reply. A few minutes later, another text appeared, this time from my mother. "Linda, Zoe, call me right now. This is serious. What is your grandmother doing?" Her tone wasn't apologetic or concerned, it was angry, accusatory, as if I had betrayed them by letting Maggie step in. I set the phone down, my heart pounding. Part of me wanted to call back, to scream that I wasn't their ATM anymore. But another part, the part that was learning to protect itself, whispered that silence was strength. I looked out the window at the snow clinging to the pine trees in the yard. Maggie's house was a refuge, but deep down, I knew the real storm was still coming. Maggie walked into the kitchen wearing a red sweater with Santa Claus on it, holding a plate of leftover gingerbread cookies from the night before. She glanced at my phone and raised an eyebrow. "They've started, haven't they?" she asked, her tone calm but razor-sharp. I nodded, pushing the phone toward her. "Sarah said her card got declined. Mom's telling me to call her back immediately." "I don't know what to do, Grandma." Maggie sat down and slid the plate of cookies toward me. "Eat first, then talk. You'll need your strength to deal with those vultures." I took a small bite, the spicy sweetness of the ginger snapping me awake. "Grandma, I'm scared they'll do something worse. It's not just about money for them, it's about control. They need me to feel small, to feel important themselves. If I don't respond, they'll find a way to hurt me, or Noah. In no minor, they're reading about the body filming." Maggie nodded slowly, her piercing eyes locking onto mine. "I know, Zoe. I've seen how they manipulate you for years. But this time, they don't get the chance. I've shut down every shared account your mother set up for the Harper family. Chloe's private school tuition, Richard and Linda's mortgage, every single thing. From now on, they'll have to stand on their own 2 feet. I stared at her, stunned. "You shut everything down? Last night?" Maggie smiled, not kindly, but with that familiar spark of defiance that made her both terrifying and admirable. "I don't wait around, Zoe. When I say something ends, I mean it. They've drained you long enough. It's time they learn to live like adults." My phone buzzed again. This time, it was my father, Richard. A short message lit up the screen. "Zoe, pay the utility bill today. They're threatening to cut power. Don't make this worse." The words hit me like a punch to the chest. No apology. No concern about Noah or me. Just another demand, as if I were still the foolish daughter who'd do anything for their approval. I handed the phone to Maggie. She read the message, shook her head, and sighed. "They haven't changed, Zoe. But you can. You don't owe them a single thing." I nodded, though inside, that old familiar voice crept back in, the one they'd planted years ago. "If you don't help them, they'll hate you more. They'll say you're selfish. That you destroyed the family." I hated that voice, the one my mother, Sarah, and even my father had carved into my mind ever since Michael died. Noah ran into the kitchen, holding a Lego model shaped like a Christmas tree. "Mom, look, I made this for Grandma Maggie," he said, setting it proudly on the table, his eyes glowing with excitement. Maggie clapped her hands and laughed. "That's wonderful, kiddo. You're making me want to build an entire Lego forest." Noah laughed, and I pulled him into my arms, feeling the warmth of his small body. I looked at Maggie, knowing I had to be strong for Noah, even as my heart wrestled with anger and guilt. The phone buzzed again. Another message from Sarah, this one longer. You think you've won, Zoe? You manipulated Grandma into giving you money, but you won't get away with it. I'll make sure everyone knows who you really are. Reading it felt like someone had poured ice water down my back. Sarah wasn't just angry, she was declaring war. I looked at Maggie, waiting for her guidance. She picked up the phone, skimmed the message, and set it back down with a sigh. Don't respond, Zoe, she said firmly. They're trying to drag you into the mud with them. But you don't belong there anymore. You have Noah, you have me, and now you have a new home. They can't take that away from you. I nodded, though my hands trembled as I held the phone. I wanted to reply to tell Sarah I hadn't manipulated anyone, that I was only protecting my son. But then I remembered Maggie's words, silence is strength. I locked the screen and placed the phone face down on the table. I won't reply, I said, my voice raspy but resolute. Maggie smiled, her eyes glowing with pride. Noah looked up from his Lego set. Mom, what's for dinner? Can we have pizza? I laughed, a hint of lightness breaking through the tension. Pizza it is, sweetheart. I'll order one as soon as we go back to the living room. Noah cheered and ran off to find Tom, eager to show him the Lego tree. I watched him go, knowing I was standing at a crossroads. The Harper family wouldn't stop, not today, not tomorrow. But this time, I wouldn't let them control me again. Maggie stood and rested a hand on my shoulder. You're stronger than they think, Zoe. And I'll be here to remind you of that. She pointed to the wooden box, still sitting unopened on the table. When you're ready, open it. But for today, just enjoy Christmas with Noah. I nodded, tightening my grip around the new house key in my hand. The storm of the Harper family was coming, but this time, I had Maggie, I had Noah, and I had a home of my own, and that was the beginning of something far greater than I had ever dared to dream. The faint smell of fresh paint lingered in the small house in Evanston, where Noah and I had started moving in a few days after Christmas. The walls were still bare, a few unpacked boxes scattered across the wooden floor, and sunlight streamed through the windows, landing softly on the drawing of a Christmas tree Noah had taped to the wall. I stood in the kitchen, holding a cup of coffee, watching my son sit on the living room floor, carefully building a tiny Lego house. Mom, this looks like our new house, doesn't it? He asked, his voice full of excitement. I smiled and nodded, but the smile quickly faded when my phone buzzed again. A message from Sarah. You think you can run away? Everyone knows you're selfish, living off Grandma's money like some leech. I gripped the coffee cup tighter, feeling that old darkness from Christmas night claw its way back in. Ever since Maggie announced she was cutting off the Harper family's financial support, they'd become like cornered animals. The messages were just the beginning. That morning, my mother, Linda, had called the accounting firm where I worked, leaving a voicemail for my HR manager, pretending to be concerned. This is Linda Harper, Zoe's mother. I'm worried about her. She hasn't been herself since the holidays. Maybe she needs a few days off. I found out only because Lisa, a close coworker, called me right after. Zoe, what's going on? Your mom just called HR. She said you were unstable or something. I don't believe it, but you should know. Her voice was filled with worry and confusion, like she didn't want to be part of the family drama but had been dragged into it anyway. I sank into a chair, my hands trembling. Linda didn't just want to control me, she wanted to destroy me. My job was the one thing that had kept Noah and me steady after Michael's death. I remembered those long days at the office, the smell of Keurig coffee machines, the hum of printers, the chatter about the Super Bowl, all the small, ordinary things that had helped me rebuild a life piece by piece. Even when my mother and Sarah called me a failure, that job had been proof I was still standing. And now, she wanted to take that from me too. My phone buzzed again. This time, it was my father, Richard. The message read, Zoe, the electric company called. Our account got locked because of some report you filed. Fix this now, we're about to lose power. I stared at the screen, feeling like I'd been punched in the gut. Months ago, I'd discovered that my father had opened a utilities account under my name for their house even though I hadn't lived there in years. I'd filed a fraud report back then, thinking they wouldn't dare try it again. But, of course, he had. As if I were still the foolish daughter who'd pay every bill just to be accepted. I set the phone down and forced myself to breathe. Noah looked up from his Lego set, worry clouding his eyes. Mom, are you okay? Your phone keeps buzzing. I forced a smile, not wanting him to see the panic tightening in my chest. I'm fine, sweetheart, just work stuff. But deep down, I knew I couldn't keep letting the Harper family drag me down. I needed to act. Maggie had once mentioned a lawyer, Karen Walsh, an old friend from her book club in Street Joseph. I called her, my voice trembling as I explained the messages, the phone calls from my mother, and the utility account my father had opened in my name. Karen's voice was calm but sharp, the voice of someone who knew how to untangle chaos. Zoe, if they used your name without consent, that's fraud. We'll handle it, she said, as if it were just another case. But to me, it felt like tearing down a wall my family had built around me for years. I began keeping a journal, a new habit to keep my mind steady. In the still empty living room, I sat on the floor and wrote. I used to believe that, if I helped them, they would love me. But they don't love me. They love my money. And I let Noah get hurt because of it. Writing those words burned like fire, but it also felt like medicine forcing me to confront how long I had enabled them to control me. My mind drifted back to 2022, the year Sarah was evicted from her apartment for not paying rent. She had called me, sobbing, saying Chloe would have nowhere to sleep unless I helped. I sent her $2,000, even though it meant Noah and I would live on instant noodles for a month. Sarah never thanked me. She only said, "You should be grateful you get to help your family." I swallowed the pain back then, convincing myself it was my duty. But now, reading her poisonous messages, I finally saw the truth. Sarah had never seen me as her sister, only as her personal bank. The phone buzzed again, snapping me back to the present. A Facebook notification. Sarah had made a public post, tagging me by name. Some people use their kids to manipulate family, stealing from their elderly grandmother to live in luxury. But karma's coming, Zoe Harper. My heart pounded as I read the words. Sarah wasn't just attacking me anymore, she was trying to destroy my reputation. I wanted to reply, to scream that she was the manipulator, that she had lied and taken from everyone. But then I heard Maggie's voice in my head, "Don't let them drag you into the mud." I locked my phone, refusing to engage. For the first time, silence didn't feel like surrender, it felt like control. Noah ran over and wrapped his arms around me. "Mom, I finished the Lego house. Come see." I knelt down beside him, looking at the tiny model complete with windows and a little chimney. "It's perfect, sweetheart," I said softly, my voice trembling. "You make me so proud." Noah beamed, and in that moment, I knew I had to keep fighting, not just for myself, but for him, for this little boy who deserved a life untouched by the Harper family's cruelty. I picked up my phone and called Karen. "Miss Walsh, I want to start gathering evidence. I have a box of documents from my grandmother, and I think it'll help." Karen agreed to meet me the next day. After I hung up, my eyes drifted to the new house key, lying on the kitchen table, glinting in the sunlight. I still hadn't opened Maggie's wooden box, but I knew I would soon. The Harpers could come after me, but this time, I wasn't going to let them win. That night, after Noah had fallen asleep in his new bedroom, I sat by the window, staring out at the quiet Evanston street. A letter had been slipped under the front door, no return address, just a handwritten line, "Blood is blood. You're turning family into enemies." My hands trembled as I picked it up, but I didn't open it. I didn't need to. It was from Sarah, or my mother, or maybe both. But this time, I wasn't afraid. I had Maggie, I had Noah, and I had a home of my own. That was something they could never take away. But the next morning, when my phone buzzed with a call from Noah's elementary school, my heart nearly stopped. "Hello, Miss Harper, this is Mrs. Miller from the front office." The woman's voice was calm but urgent. "We just had an incident. Your sister, Sarah, came to the school saying you'd asked her to pick up Noah." Thankfully, Miss Jane at the front desk recognized her from a birthday party years ago and thought something was off. "We didn't release Noah and are calling you immediately." "It's some that." I gripped the phone, my whole body trembling. "Sarah?" I repeated, my voice cracking. Did she do anything? Is Noah okay? Mrs. Miller assured me that Noah was still in class, completely unaware of what had happened, but that I needed to come in and update my emergency contact list immediately. I hung up, my hand shaking so hard I dropped the spoon I was holding. Sarah hadn't just been attacking me with messages or public posts. She had tried to get to Noah, my son, the child she and the rest of my family had humiliated on Christmas night. I grabbed my phone again and called Maggie, my voice breaking as I told her everything. Grandma, Sarah went to Noah's school. She pretended to be me. She tried to pick him up. I don't know what she was planning, but I'm terrified. Maggie was silent for a moment, then her voice came through, cold and steady as steel. Zoe, listen to me. Stay calm. Pick Noah up yourself, update the contact list, and bring him straight home. I'll take care of the rest. They are not going to get near that boy again. I rushed to the school, my heart pounding so hard it echoed in my ears. Winter in Evanston was sharp and cold, children bundled in coats playing in the yard, but all I could picture was Sarah standing at the front desk, pretending to be me. When I arrived, Jane, the older receptionist, immediately pulled me into a hug. Zoe, I knew something was off. Sarah said you were sick and asked her to pick up Noah, but I remembered her from Noah's 6th birthday party. I called you right away. I thanked her, fighting back tears, and updated the emergency contact list. From now on, only Maggie and I were authorized to pick Noah up. On the drive home, I kept glancing at Noah through the rearview mirror. He was chatting happily about his math quiz, completely unaware of what had just happened. I didn't want to scare him, so I said gently, "Sweetheart, things are a little messy right now, but you're safe. Mom and Grandma Maggie will always protect you." Noah nodded and smiled. I know, Mom. Grandma Maggie's like a superhero. I laughed, though inside, a quiet dread twisted tighter in my chest. Sarah had crossed a line, and I knew this wouldn't be the last time. That evening, in our new house, I took out the wooden box Maggie had given me. I had been putting off opening it, but after what happened at school, I couldn't wait any longer. Inside were stacks of documents, receipts, bills, and copies of tax forms. My pulse quickened as I flipped through them. My name appeared on multiple tax filings from 2021 through 2024. My parents had listed me as a dependent to claim tax refunds, even though I had been financially independent since Michael's death. Then I found a credit card statement under my name, showing a $9,000 debt opened in 2022, the same year I had been drowning in hospital bills. They had used my identity, quietly and deliberately, as if I were nothing more than a puppet for their convenience. I called Maggie's friend, attorney Karen Walsh, right away. "Miss Walsh, I found evidence. They filed fraudulent tax returns under my name, and there's a credit card account I never opened." Karen's voice remained calm, but edged with authority. "Zoe, that's serious financial fraud. Send me everything. We'll file reports with the IRS and the credit company. They won't get away with this." I sank to the floor, clutching the stack of papers, feeling as if I'd unearthed a missing piece of myself. For years, I'd believed I was the failure, the burden, the family disappointment. But now I saw the truth. They hadn't just hurt me and Noah. They had stolen from me, quietly, legally, and shamelessly, until I finally fought back. That night, I opened my journal and wrote slowly, my hands steady for the first time in weeks. I let them define me for too long. But not anymore. I will protect Noah, and I will protect myself. This things and self is. My mind drifted back to an evening in 2023 when my mother had called me in tears, sobbing about their mortgage being at risk. I'd sent her $5,000, money I couldn't spare, money that meant Noah wouldn't get the new shoes he needed. She hadn't thanked me. All she'd said was, "You should be doing more, Zoe. Family is everything." And I had believed her. I'd convinced myself that sacrifice equaled love, that if I kept giving, they would finally see me as one of them. But now, staring at these documents, I realized that family in their eyes had never been about love. It was a transaction. Noah ran in, wrapping his arms around me. "Mom, can we have pizza tonight? Like at Grandma Maggie's?" I smiled and pulled him close. Of course, sweetheart. I'll order pepperoni, your favorite. He cheered, darting off to grab my phone. I watched him go, a fierce sense of resolve rising inside me. Sarah might try to come near Noah again, my mother and father might threaten and manipulate, but I would never let them touch my son again. I opened my laptop and sent every document to Karen. As I hit send, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. The Harper family could keep coming for me, but this time, I wasn't just a victim. I had Maggie. I had Karen, and, most importantly, I had Noah. I glanced at Noah's drawing of the Christmas tree on the wall, the sunlight making the colors glow. I knew the road ahead would be long, but for the first time in years, I was ready to walk it. The next morning, an email from Karen Walsh appeared in my inbox. Zoe, Chloe's private school has reported Sarah to the police for federal scholarship fraud. She falsified documents to claim state education funds for 3 years. Sarah was arrested this morning, and the story has already made the local news. I opened my laptop and searched Evanston Now. There it was, front page. Naperville resident arrested for private school scholarship fraud. Sarah's mugshot stared back at me. Orange jumpsuit, exhausted eyes. The same face that once mocked me across the dinner table, stripped of all its gloss and entitlement. I didn't share the article. I didn't comment. I didn't need to. The truth was finally speaking for itself. I turned back to Noah, who was sitting on the floor, drawing and softly humming a Christmas song even though the holiday season was long over. I decided not to tell him about Sarah. He didn't need to know how far his aunt had gone to hurt us. But I couldn't stop thinking about Chloe, only 10 years old, caught in the wreckage of her mother's lies. I wondered if she was scared, if she was blaming herself, the way Noah once did that night on Christmas. But I pushed the thought away. I couldn't save Chloe, not while Sarah and the Harper family still saw me as the enemy. My phone buzzed again. A message from my father, Richard. Zoe, we all make mistakes. No one deserves to go to jail over family issues. Don't make this worse. I stared at the screen, feeling as if I'd been stabbed. There was no apology, no mention of Noah, no acknowledgement of the years they'd taken advantage of me, only an attempt to make me feel guilty, to silence me, as if I had caused Sarah's arrest. I didn't reply. I had learned from Maggie that silence wasn't weakness. It was how I took my power back. My mind drifted to a night in 2023 when I'd gone to my parents' house for dinner. Sarah had bragged about her trip to Hawaii, a trip I had partially paid for while my mother complained that I hadn't brought a proper gift for Chloe. Zoe, you need to try harder, she'd said, her tone dripping with disdain. This family needs you to do more. I had nodded, swallowed my hurt, and sent them money for their water bill a week later. But now, reading my father's message, I saw it clearly. They had never seen me as family, only as a resource to exploit. I called Karen and told her about my father's message. They're panicking, Zoe, she said, her voice calm but cutting. Sarah's arrest shattered their illusion of control. I just received a notice from your parents' lawyer. They're withdrawing their civil claim for $60,000 in so-called parental support and emotional damages. They know they can't win. I exhaled, relief mixing with disbelief. Maggie had already sent a formal letter to Chloe's school confirming she would no longer cover tuition, and my parents' mortgage was now at risk of foreclosure. The Harpers had finally run out of lifelines. I went back to the kitchen, picked up my pen, and opened my journal, the place where I had learned to let the pain out instead of burying it. I didn't put them in jail. I didn't destroy their family. I just stopped protecting them, and they fell apart on their own. As I wrote those words, the weight that had clung to me for years seemed to lift. I was no longer the maid, no longer the failure. I was Zoe Harper, a mother, a woman learning to love herself again. Noah came running in, holding up his latest drawing. Mom, look. Our house has smoke coming out of the chimney now. I laughed and pulled him into my arms. It's beautiful, sweetheart. You make me want to stay here forever. Noah grinned, his joy radiant, and I sat with him on the floor, sharing one of the last gingerbread cookies from Maggie's kitchen. I looked around the pale blue walls, Noah's drawings, the half-unpacked boxes, and for the first time in years, I felt peace. This was our home, and no one could take it away. That evening, I attended my first meeting at a support group for widowed women in Evanston, a suggestion from my coworker, Lisa. I stepped into the small room at the community center, nervous and unsure, but the warm nods and soft smiles from the women there eased my fear. I shared part of my story the Christmas night, Sarah, and how I was learning to rebuild my life. An older woman named Mary took my hand when I broke down in tears. "You're stronger than you think," she said gently. And in that moment, I realized it was the same thing Maggie had told me, only this time, I finally believed it. When I got home, I checked my phone. There was an email from Maggie. "Zoe, I've sent additional documents to Karen. They won't bother you anymore. Get some rest, and remember you're not alone." I smiled, feeling a small, steady flame ignite inside me. The Harper family might crumble, but I wouldn't. I looked at Noah, fast asleep on the couch, his drawing of our house resting beside him. I knew, no matter what they tried, I wouldn't let them touch this new life we were building. The early February sunlight streamed through the windows of Maggie's house in Street Joseph, illuminating the worn wooden walls and the shelves lined with the history books she loved. I sat in the armchair, cradling a mug of coffee, watching Noah play Monopoly with Tom at the dining table. His laughter mixed with Tom's exaggerated groans as he went bankrupt, filling the room with warmth and life. But deep inside me, a quiet storm was still brewing. Sarah's arrest for federal scholarship fraud, my parents' withdrawn lawsuit, and the eerie silence from the Harper family told me one thing: this wasn't truly over. Maggie, ever perceptive, seemed to sense it too. Today, she had called for a family meeting, not to reconcile, but to draw the final line. The wooden box she had once given me now sat open on the coffee table, its contents neatly organized: tax fraud reports, credit card statements, and evidence of years of deceit. Karen Walsh had already forwarded everything to the IRS and the credit company, and I knew those actions were shaking the Harper family to its core. But what weighed on me wasn't fear for them, it was worry for Chloe, the 10-year-old caught in the wreckage her mother had created. I couldn't help but wonder if she was scared, if she was blaming herself, the way Noah once did that night on Christmas. Maggie walked into the room wearing a deep blue sweater with a reindeer stitched across the front, a stack of papers in one hand, and her wedding ring glinting faintly on the other. She gave me a soft smile, though her eyes carried the calm focus of a general before battle. "Ready, Zoe?" she asked, her voice low but steady. I nodded, my pulse quickening. "I think so, Grandma." Noah glanced up from the Monopoly board, curiosity in his eyes, but Tom quickly distracted him with a joke about hotel taxes, keeping him busy while the real conversation began. The meeting began at noon. Only a few relatives came: Uncle Paul, Aunt Ellen, and a cousin named Mark, whom I barely knew. None of the Harpers showed up, not my mother, not my father, not Sarah. Their absence didn't surprise me, but it left an ache, a hollow silence that hung in the air. Maggie stood in the center of the living room, holding her will in one hand, her voice clear and unwavering. "I've spent my whole life trying to hold this family together," she began, her gaze sweeping across the room, "but I was wrong to believe everyone deserved to be part of it. Zoe and Noah are the only ones who never asked me for anything, and they're the only ones I trust. Everything I own, the house, the land, the accounts, will go to them. For those who stayed silent when Zoe and Noah were being hurt, you'll get the same silence from me." The room fell quiet. Uncle Paul lowered his head, sorrow flickering across his face, as if he'd known all along how toxic the Harper family had become. Aunt Ellen reached for Maggie's hand and whispered, "You did the right thing, Mom." Mark just nodded, his expression unreadable. I sat there, clutching my coffee cup, my heart pounding so hard it felt like it had risen to my throat. Maggie wasn't just cutting off the Harper family, she was declaring that Noah and I were her true family. But even as gratitude filled me, a pang of guilt pressed at my chest. I thought of Chloe, of the little girl who would grow up in the wreckage of her mother's choices. I wanted to do something, to reach out, but I knew I couldn't save her from the world Sarah had built. That night, after Noah had fallen asleep on the couch with Maggie's old dog curled against him, I found a letter shoved under the front door. No return address, just my mother's sharp, familiar handwriting. You think you've won? You're turning blood into enemies. My hands trembled as I brought it to Maggie. She glanced at it, scoffed, and tossed it into the fireplace. Flames swallowed the paper in seconds. Let them hate you from a distance, Zoe, she said, pouring herself a glass of wine and handing me one. They don't get to control you anymore. I held the glass, but didn't drink. Grandma, I'm worried about Chloe. She's just a child. None of this is her fault. If Sarah, I stopped, unsure what I wanted to say. Maggie sat beside me, her expression softening. Zoe, she said gently, you have a big heart. But you can't save people who don't want to be saved. Chloe is Sarah's daughter, and Sarah has made her choices. You need to focus on Noah and on yourself. I nodded, knowing she was right, though guilt still lingered, like a shadow I couldn't shake. I opened my journal and wrote, I want to help Chloe, but I can't. I have to protect Noah, and for the first time, I have to protect myself. As the words filled the page, something inside me loosened. I was no longer the girl desperate to please the Harpers. I was Zoe, a mother, a woman learning to stand tall again. The next morning, I received one final message from my parents. If this is what you want, then we're done. Don't show up when Maggie dies, and don't pretend to care. They blocked my number immediately after, as if I were the one who needed punishment. I stared at the message, waiting for the pain to hit, but it never came. Instead, I felt light, as if an invisible chain had finally been cut. I blocked them back, not out of anger, but out of peace. I simply didn't need them anymore. Noah slept nearby, a faint smile on his lips. Maggie poured another small glass of wine and looked at me. You okay, sweetheart? She asked softly. I nodded and smiled. I'm okay, Grandma. For the first time, I really am. Maggie squeezed my hand, her eyes glowing with pride. Good, she said. Now go live your life, Zoe. If you cling to their 50 dated. I turned toward the window, where snowflakes drifted gently through the pine trees. The Harpers had disappeared from my life not through a grand confrontation, but through their own silence. And for once, that silence didn't scare me. It felt like freedom. The cold wind from Lake Michigan swept through the wooden cabin in Wisconsin, where Noah and I spent a quiet weekend in early February 2025. Snow blanketed the pines outside, turning the landscape into something out of a painting. Inside, the fireplace crackled, filling the air with the scent of Maggie's ginger cookies and hot cocoa. Noah sat on the rug, deeply focused on assembling a new Lego set Tom had given him, while Maggie and Tom bickered playfully over who got to keep the hotel card in Monopoly. I sat in the armchair, holding my mug of cocoa, watching the scene unfold, laughter, warmth, and peace. It was a kind of happiness I hadn't felt since Michael's death. Just days earlier, at the family meeting, Maggie had officially left everything to me and Noah, severing the Harper family completely. The last letter from my mother, the one that read, "You're turning blood into enemies," had gone up in flames in Maggie's fireplace, burning away the last trace of their control over us. Since then, my phone had been silent. No messages. No calls. No slanderous posts from Sarah or my mother. And that silence, once a thing I feared, now felt like the gentlest gift. It wasn't emptiness, it was space. Space for Noah and me to rebuild, to breathe, and to finally live. Maggie walked over and placed a thick envelope on the table beside me. "This one's for you," she said, her eyes glinting with the playful sparkle of a child keeping a secret. I opened the envelope and froze. Inside were documents for a savings account in my name, with enough money to keep me comfortable for several years. "Grandma, what is this?" I asked, my voice trembling. Maggie sat down and took my hand. "This isn't for bills or debts, Zoe. It's for whatever you want to go back to school, to open a shop, or to save for rainy days. You deserve to dream again." I threw my arms around her, tears spilling down my cheeks. "I don't even know what to say. You've already given me so much." Maggie shook her head, smiling. You've never asked me for a single thing, Zoe. Meanwhile, the Harpers called every week asking for money for vacations, for cars, for whatever they wanted. That's the difference between you and them. Her words felt like warmth spreading through my chest, melting years of cold doubt. I looked over at Noah, who was proudly holding up his Lego model for Tom. Mr. Tom, look, I made a bridge. Tom clapped, pretending to be amazed. Kiddo, you're gonna be an engineer someday. Noah laughed, his eyes shining, and for the first time in a long while, I felt that everything might truly be okay. That night, I opened my journal and wrote, I used to think love required sacrifice. But Maggie is right, real family never asks you to trade your self-worth for their affection. I'm learning to love myself, and that's the greatest gift I can give Noah. As I finished the sentence, I felt something inside me begin to heal. I thought about the support group for widowed women in Evanston, where I had started sharing my story. Women like Mary, whose kind eyes and gentle nods made me realize I wasn't alone. You're stronger than you think, Mary once told me, and now, for the first time, I believed it. The next morning, as I was helping Noah pack our things to return to Evanston, my phone buzzed with a new email from the Widowed Women's Scholarship Foundation. I opened it, expecting another polite rejection like before. But the first line made me gasp, "Congratulations, Miss Zoe Harper." They had accepted my application, a full scholarship for a master's in finance at Northwestern University, a dream I once thought impossible. I read the email 3 times, hands trembling, unable to believe it. I had submitted that application late one night after Noah had gone to bed, thinking, why not try? And now, the door I never dared to knock on was standing wide open. I ran into the living room, where Maggie and Tom were in the middle of arguing over who had won the last game of Monopoly. "Grandma, I got the scholarship," I shouted, waving my phone in the air. Maggie shot up from her chair and threw her arms around me. "Well, it's about damn time." She laughed, then hurried to pour us both some coffee. Tom grinned, giving my shoulder a firm pat. "Kid, you're gonna blow Northwestern away." Noah ran over, wrapping his little arms around my leg. "Mom, you're gonna be the smartest person there." I laughed, pulling him close. "Maybe not the smartest, sweetheart, but I'll do my best." Thanks for watching Maid by Deltime. I looked around the cabin, the crackling fireplace, the Monopoly board scattered with fake money, the scent of Maggie's cookies still hanging in the air, and realized this was my real family. Not the Harpers, who only ever took, but Maggie, Tom, Noah, and the women from the support group, the people who reminded me I was enough, just as I was. That night, I opened my journal again and wrote, "Today, I didn't just survive, I lived. And for the first time, I feel like I am enough." All that stop. When Noah had drifted off to sleep, I stepped outside onto the porch. Snow fell softly, blanketing the frozen lake under the pale glow of the moon. The night was quiet, still the kind of peace I never thought I'd feel again. I thought of Sarah, of my mother and father, of all the years I let them define who I was. But not anymore. Now, I was defining myself. The scholarship was just the beginning, and though the road ahead would be long, I knew I was finally ready to walk it.